we are at a very, very critical situation, probably the worst since 1974 on the Cyprus question, and in particular on the negotiations on the Cyprus question. I'm not going to go back in previous negotiations, but I just wanted very, very briefly to explain how and why we arrived at this very critical and very dangerous, I would say, situation. It all started after the Crans-Montana conference, the collapse of the conference, and the 4 years that have elapsed without any negotiations during these 4 years. One development that was very negative, and I might say that we did not help in preventing this development, is the non-re-election of Mr. Mustafa Akinci as the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. I have worked with Mr. Akinci as I have worked with previous Turkish Cypriot leaders, and I can admit that Mr. Akinci was probably the most pro-solution leader of the Turkish Cypriot community. So his non-re-election was a very strong blow on developments regarding the Cyprus question, because we have a new Turkish Cypriot leader in the name of Mr. Ersin Tatar, who unfortunately is following Ankara's directions from the very beginning. To remind you that Turkey, after Crans-Montana, its position was that negotiations based on a bizonal, bicommunal federation are not acceptable to Turkey anymore, and that a two-state solution was the way forward. Mr. Akinci, while he was the leader of the Turkish Cypriot community, he objected very strongly to this position. But unfortunately, his non-re-election and the election of Mr. Tatar led, unfortunately, to the present impasse, because we have Turkey and a Turkish Cypriot leader of the Turkish Cypriot community that formally reject the basis of the solution as has been agreed over the last, let's say, 45 years, the basis of a federal solution based on a bizonal, bicommunal federation with political equality. And unfortunately also, because of the convening of the informal 5+ conference, which was Turkey's inspiration to have this conference, Mr. Tatar was able to present in a formal, I would say, in writing, his proposal for a two-state solution. One might say that this was an informal meeting, so it doesn't matter, but believe me, with my experience of over 40 years in diplomacy, it does matter that this proposal was put on the table in a written form. So we are definitely at an impasse, because on the one hand, we have our side that continues to base its position on bizonal, bicommunal federation and the convergences that have been reached so far, and the 6-point framework of the Secretary General. And on the other hand, you have Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot leader who are objecting this solution, and they propose a two-state solution. So it is not possible, to my mind, to have common ground with these two diametrically opposed positions. So what should be done? And this is, I think, the question that we should answer. To my mind, again, what should be done is to persuade Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot leadership to return to the basis that we have agreed over the years, the bizonal bicommunal federation, and of course to continue to commit to the convergences and to the 6-point framework. How can we do that? And this is again the difficult question. I have proposed recently that only through a very strong American intervention, especially with the new President of the United States, Joe Biden, this could possibly happen through the appointment of a prominent presidential envoy of President Biden that could assist the Secretary General in his effort. And I stress assist and not replace, because the talks should continue under the UN auspices. But if this impasse continues, I think that only a very strong American intervention in this form of an American presidential envoy, so an envoy of the president himself, could intervene and help the parties find common ground. And of course, what is the most important thing is for Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot leadership to return to the negotiating table on the agreed framework. So this has been my proposal, because I don't think that there is any other way to find common ground. There is nothing in between. There is either federation or two states. Two states is definitely unacceptable to the Greek Cypriot community. Of course, I would like to say that unfortunately, there were moments during this 4-year intervention from Crans-Montana that there were some talks that even on our side, we were entertaining this idea. I just put this in parentheses, and this was very damaging for our side. But if we prove to not only to the Americans, but generally to the international community that we are committed and that we continue to abide by all convergences that we had achieved until Crans-Montana, and that we are also committed to the 6-point framework of Mr. Guterres, then we can ask the American president to put forward a presidential envoy. And of course, we should continue to ask for the commitment and the support of the other permanent members of the Security Council, France, the UK, and Russia, and of course, China. So through these initiatives, I think this is the only way that we can succeed to restart the negotiations from the moment of the collapse of the conference. Is this realistic? Is this possible? If we don't try it, we're not going to find out. And of course, if we don't do anything and we wait until another conference and another conference and another conference, then Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot leadership will continue with the creation of the fait accompli, what we have seen in Varosha, and they will continue. I am convinced that they will not stop on Varosha. They have already announced for this 3.5% of the area to be declassified from military area to civilian use area, which is an unthinkable, unprecedented violation of the status quo of Varosha. So they will continue with these violations. They will continue with other fait accompli, either on the ground or in the EEZ, in the exclusive economic zone of Cyprus. So, and also another proposal I have is that we should convince the Secretary General not to have another 5+ conference, but to convene tripartite conferences, meetings with the two leaders and himself, until we reach the point that we can go back to the negotiations based on the agreed framework. So on Varosha, of course, the situation is the worst ever. I have been following developments on Varosha for the last 40 years, and this is the first time that we are witnessing such a serious and severe violation of the status quo. There were some violations in the past, and this is why we had resolutions passed by the Security Council, Resolution 550 and Resolution 789. But I would like to say also that I am not happy with the way that the government has handled the situation so far. And I will explain why. From the very beginning, I was very strong in proposing that we should have a formal recourse to the Security Council. The situation is so adverse, is so difficult, is so serious that we should have had a recourse to the Security Council for a formal resolution, and not what we have opted for, which is presidential statements. Presidential statements are not resolutions. They don't have a binding effect. They don't have a legal effect. So we should have opted for a recourse for a resolution to be adopted. Things, of course, are not easy. And we have seen this through some moves that we witnessed, especially from the British side, but we had a very strong support from the other permanent members of the Security Council. So I think that if we have opted for a resolution, we could have succeeded to get a resolution. We should have three very important provisions. The first one, which I have not seen in the presidential statement, and unfortunately I have not seen also in the UNFICYP resolution, is that the UN holds the government of Turkey responsible for maintaining the status quo of Varosha. This is the position of the United Nations, which has been included in all the reports of the Secretary General, the most recent one included as well. So this is the first provision, that the UN continues to hold the government of Turkey responsible for maintaining the status quo. The second, we should have asked for the transfer of the area to the administration of the United Nations, as it is provided also in Resolution 550, but this is the moment to repeat it in a Varosha specific resolution. And the third one, of course, that any moves for settlement of the area whole area or part of the area with people other than the legitimate inhabitants is absolutely unacceptable to the UN. We have not seen these. We have seen the presidential statements. We have seen the statement of Mr. Borrell on behalf of the foreign ministers of the European Union. But these are political statements, valuable, of course, but not strong enough to prevent or to avert what is coming from Russia. So in a nutshell, we are really going through a very difficult, very critical, very dangerous situation. So we should take initiatives. We should be at the forefront of taking initiatives to revert this situation and convince, of course, the international community not only that we are committed, but also that we are credible and that our first and utmost priority is the solution of the Cyprus problem.